So yeah, critique time! Since I'm still facing this boss, well, capturing this boss next stream, let's do another critique for some other boss this time. And since this time we didn't face any big boss, we're just gonna critique the biggest enemy we face today, and I think that enemy is the Sea Dragon, which is a cool one to critique, I'll say. So before I begin, disclaimers as usual, this is a not in-depth game design discussion. I'm gonna focus more on the visuals here. And also, I'm gonna follow Feldman's method for this art critique, which involves 4 steps: description, analysis, interpretation, and judgment. On the description, I'll describe what I see. On the analysis, I'm gonna talk about and look into the elements of art. On the interpretation, I will interpret the creative vision behind the art. And on the judgment step, I'm going to call this a successful or unsuccessful work of art, basing myself on the principles of art. So let's begin. Description, what do I see? Oh, it's a very angry seahorse, right? Basically. I don't know, we only see like the head of it. It's very angry, pretty big, and yellow, I guess. There's like a leaf in this part here. And it's, I don't know, menacing, let's say. I read said angry. And what else? And yeah, it looks like this sort of sea creature, a unique kind of seahorse, maybe. Stuff like that. Okay. I guess that's it for the description. Let's get a more in-depth look with the analysis and the elements of art. So, analysis. I'm gonna be considering 8 elements of art for this critique. The usual 7 plus points, like some authors. So that makes 4 points: lines, shapes, forms, space, texture, color, and value. So, let's begin. Points. For points here, there's like a number of black ones here, right? Around the side of the head of the sea dragon. Also a number of black ones here on the back of it, on the neck, on its neck. And what else? So there's like all these black ones. There's kinda some here, you could say, kind of. More of a darker shade of yellow there. And that's it for points. That's mostly where they're placed, and I like to mention their colors also, even though there's also the element of color later. I think I didn't miss any points, roughly speaking. This stuff here I'm probably talking about for in terms of texture and or shapes. So yeah, so let's talk about lines now. So good to see some classic lines for once, instead of just the same aesthetics from Team Fortress 2. It can get tiring. So yeah, 4 lines here. Black lines outlining everything, making the contour of it. A lot of curvature and edges. The more straight parts are like at the nose of the sea dragon. There's like some straightness here, but other than that, in the mouth, I guess, somewhat. But it's not really straight, right? It's just like curvy around and many edges, like there are edges here, edges here. Here's probably the sharpest edge, but also a number of like dents, let's say. And as I mentioned, it seems to me all lines are black. They are somewhat a bit thin lines, maybe, but still noticeable. I would call this somewhat thin lines. And I already mentioned the color. Their thickness is regular in general, seems to me, like all around. I already mentioned curvature. And the continuity in the lines is pretty common here. It's hard to see like a line that you draw a bit and stop, and draw like jumps, gaps between the lines. There's a lot of continuity on them also. So that's it for lines. Let's talk about shapes now. For shapes, there was a lot of curvature and bent parts and edges, not sharp edges, but still. There was a lot of that for lines, and I see a lot of it for shapes too, especially on the neck, on the head of the Sea Dragon, all this like curvy part. There's all that for shapes, although you still have like these longer shapes for the nose and the mouth. Somewhat thicker for the neck, although still with a lot of curves and smaller details in the shapes there. And some protrusions for these parts here and the seaweed part, although the seaweed has notably a sharp edge at the end of it. And for the shapes, that's mostly it. And I guess also some roundness on the eye that we can see, but like a lot of curvature here on this part, right? Look at this. And I guess we could also say it's roughly triangular-ish, like if we try to look it from a distance, the head of the Sea Dragon. But naturally it's far from a triangle if you look at it for just like 2 seconds. There's a lot of differences, but still, like, it's one way to try to simplify it, I suppose. I guess that's good enough for shapes. Let's move on to forms. How about three-dimensionality? So for the forms here, again we see. Am I gonna mention curvature again? Maybe, depends. Because I'm looking at not just the outline this time. I'm looking at stuff like these parts here, and they still look curvy. They still look like there's a lot of bends and indentations and curves and stuff, but not through the same, not like the lines were making that for the shapes, in a different way this time. Other than that, there is also some sort of small concavity on the eyes, what else? Also something like stretching for the nose. The mouth also has like a concavity. You can see the insides of the mouth, so that's a difference from the shapes and from the forms and the shapes, for example. You have like this concavity for the forms of it. Did I say shapes? I meant forms. What else? Again, protruding forms for these details on the back of the head of the Sea Dragon, behind its head, but also like they're thin and a bit concave, like this part here, has a little bit of a, it's like somewhat concave. The others are just protruding and thin, I suppose. And finally, for the neck itself, the girth of it is pretty noticeable. There's like some, do you see it here? Some sort of layers, let's say. Not layers, but like muscles, maybe, stuff like that. Kind of this sort of pattern going on here on this part, which I think communicates a bit of its forms. And it would be like layered. I don't think layered is the best way to describe it. It is, I don't know, it has this like pulsating pattern, for the form of it. And other than that, is mostly like, in general, somewhat cylindrical, right, with some amount of imperfections, the neck of it. That's it for forms, I think. If we talk about the element of space, now things are gonna get a little bit different. For space, there is like small use of it inside of the mouth, there's space there. I mentioned the concave form, and naturally that translates to the element of space. Other than that, there is like tightness in how the details are so close to each other behind the back of the Sea Dragon, behind the head, behind the neck of the Sea Dragon. Also like details on the neck itself, like on parts here of the neck apparently. Also tightness around the eye, there's like this gap that was placed there. I guess also on the nose is tight use of space there. And that's, I think in general and then it's just like something expensive for the rest, right? What else? Texture. The element of texture now, that actually I always find interesting and engaging to look at. For textures here, we could say we have somewhat wrinkled textures, kind of. Maybe there's a better way to describe it, but kind of on this part, with the curvatures on the forms and all that. We also have this part I mentioned before. It has a somewhat of a blotched texture to it. There are like these smears on it. These not smears, what kind of smears? Kind of stains, you know, for textures there. Also, this like the points are also kind of give off some sort of pattern texture to it, somewhat. You know, the way the points are placed. Probably there's a better word than pattern here. Not sure, I'd have to research to recap my studies on textures. What else? Other than that... So these imperfections also give off this kind of rugose texture. The slight protrusions. Maybe this part you could say somewhat of a wrinkle texture. What else? Not sure. The leaves kind of reflecting light, but I'm not sure that's an effect from texture. I don't know, maybe that's good enough. The eye, I suppose, is kind of... No, I don't think... I was going to say about the texture on the eye, but I don't think I see on there. Again, just an effect from light and darkness. I think that's mostly it. And I guess, just as a last point, I would say there is like some... it's like there's an imperfect texture. It's like, you know, it's not smooth here. It's not exactly rough, but it's texture with this amount of like... and some sort of imperfect feel to it, with, you know, a lot of... a certain degree of ups and downs. Especially like on the underside of the jaw of the sea dragon. And other parts, you know, like the nose, stuff like that. It's like slight bends and changes in the angles, let's say. I think there's a bit of texture in that. With that said, we can go to the element of color. So this is gonna be a cool one because there is like shades of yellow, orange and red, right? So yellow, for example, on the upper part of the head and of the neck. Then we have red on the jaw and this underside part of the neck. And then we have some... Do we have orange too, or is it just yellow and red? You gotta be careful. Also red on these details parts here, a darker red on the very tips of the details of the head. Maybe it's just yellow and red, I guess. It's just like, you know, orange is the mixture of both, so maybe that's why it can kind of fool at least my eyes. I think it's just a bunch of yellow and red, right? And notably, this little leaf here is in shades of green. So, and also the eye is in shades of white, you know. Ooh, I just realized that the eye has like this line in it, right? Should have mentioned it, not which is not like outlining or anything. That's the line with a little bit more thickness to it. Should have said that, but anyway. In any case, for color, yeah, just yellow, a bunch of yellow and red, and small parts with the green and the white. And like, yeah, and just a reminder, different shades of yellow, you know, different shades of red, so on and so forth. And finally, there's the element of value. How about light and darkness, brightness and shadows? Shadiness. So we can see like many parts with light being reflected, like on the upper part of the back and on a lot of parts on the head. a bit less here, and we see some shader parts on near the jaw here, on this underside of the maxilla, I think that's how you say it. Maxilla, I believe. Also, there's like the shadow underneath. What else? So that's where I see. And this brightness and shadiness, the light is not that intense, you know, as far as candela go. The unit of measurement of light intensity doesn't seem to be that high, that intense. Nothing flashy. And darkness doesn't also seems to be mild here. Nothing extremely dark that you can see the details. Again, we can see the points and the kind of the forms through the shades, so you know. Also, I guess there is use of shades in the insides of the mouth, and I believe also some on the other side here, on these parts more further behind the sea dragon. I believe there's also use of shades there, although again mild ones. I guess that's it for where there are light and darkness, how they're placed. And I did mention something for the eye before, and like as much like there is a lot of bright parts on the upper side of the dragon, light being reflected there. There is a degree of it reflecting also reaching the eye, you know, hitting the eye, getting on there. So yeah. I believe that's it for the analysis, so let's move on to the interpretation of the creative vision. So let's see, let's begin with the basics. So let's say that this was envisioned, created as a boss for Epic Battle Fantasy V. Sorry, not a boss, an enemy for Epic Battle Fantasy V. We usually critique bosses, but this time it's just an enemy. So an enemy for Epic Battle Fantasy V. What else? There is also... we can also look at stuff like the name and stuff like that. The description. An overgrown seahorse. It uses powerful water and earth attacks. If the part is wet, it may cleverly use ice and thunder attacks too. Stuff like that. So okay, there is the description. So there is the description of in-game description. There is my description as the step for the Feldman's method. And so yeah, easily I believe we can say that I interpret at least that the idea of a seahorse, the traits of a seahorse is something that was part of the vision, should be some allusion to that. What else? It is also the sea dragon, powerful attacks with powerful earth and water attacks. What are its drops? Liquid ice, dragon scales, moon pearl, yogurt. Well, considering the name and the drops, and perhaps even the idea of that it uses powerful water and earth attacks, not sure if there are like weak dragons in... we have stuff like kobolds, but I don't know. But in many depictions of dragons there are powerful creatures, right? Strong, big, whatever. So all that said, I do believe let's stick to the basics, right? The idea of this being a dragon was also a part of the creative vision here. I could say a sea dragon specifically, or just a dragon. I don't know. So a sea dragon would basically mean a dragon from the sea. To be more specific, there is the name to consider. Sure, let's be more specific, which again, as I said before, I believe makes for a richer critique and a more meaningful conclusion, judgment in the end. Let's say it's not just about a dragon, but being a sea dragon, a dragon from the sea. So we have an enemy for Epic Battle Fantasy V, some creature, something with an allusion to seahorses, a sea dragon. What else? Can we interpret any other ideas for the creative vision here? uses powerful water and earth attacks. If the party is wet, it may cleverly use ice and thunder attacks. True. So thinking on the game design, water and earth, on the design of this game as I interpret, they're usually attacks that are more like physical damage and strong by themselves, that you don't combo with other stuff, especially earth. Water, there's a bit of that, and there's also another idea of water is that it is used for combos, much like ice and thunder. It's no coincidence that if the party is wet, it may cleverly use ice and thunder. So there's all of that for the strategy of it. But I don't know how much of that could fit into a vision behind it. We could talk about, I guess, this idea of something that focuses on water, I suppose, because it both has the idea something relating to using water and earth, and something related to wet, which is a stats effect that is intrinsically tied to water. I don't know if I should say intrinsically, but almost always tied to water. I think Typhoon wets the enemy, Aqua Volley wets the enemy and a water attack, Google Blast waters the enemies and a water attack. Although there are exceptions like Water Word and where is it? The Penguin, which wets but does not has anything to do with water attacks. But regardless of that, also the many attacks of the enemies wet your characters. So in any case, we could say that it is gonna be very easy, right? But I guess we could also add to the vision this idea that this is supposed to be an enemy tied to water, which I don't know if it's redundant with what we said already, the idea of a seahorse and a sea dragon. Is it redundant that the seahorse or sea dragon should have something to do with water? You know, this would be a waste of time for us. I will say that not necessarily, but the thing is, I don't think it would be like a waste of time, because we would look at different stuff when trying to look for things that communicate water. Maybe we would find other stuff, but I think if in the end this is successful for the ideas of a sea dragon or a seahorse, it would also be successful for the idea of an enemy tied to water, right? So even though we don't know if it's gonna be successful or not, if it's possible that it's gonna be not reach these ideas of a sea dragon or a seahorse, although let's see. It's possible that it's not gonna be successful in that front, but it still communicates something related to water, you know. So if that happens, it's not gonna be redundant. But the thing is, I don't know, I think I'd rather just simplify. I think, for the purposes of this critique, because I don't have that much time, so yeah, I'm gonna try to simplify to fit the stuff here, and maybe I don't know, we can do it with more content some other day, as always. So anyway, anything else for the vision? So I already mentioned how much it's tied to the water element of the game, stuff like that. It is weak to thunder and ice, which are both stats effect that combo with water, but that's again with the end of the vision. And it's weak to bio, resistant to wind and fire. In this game, usually like many flash creatures are weak to bio, and robots, for example, are resistant to it in many cases. You know what? I don't know. Let's just stick to these three ideas of the vision. So the idea of an enemy for Epic Battle Fantasy V, the idea of a seahorse, something that alludes to it, and then the idea of a sea dragon, a dragon from the sea, as the name suggests. And if we do have time, I might as well also check with this idea of something related to water, see if we can find anything that's different and not redundant, you know. So yeah, so I guess let's move on then. Now it's time for the Judgement step. For the Judgement step, I'm going to be considering 6 principles of art, which are movement, unity/variety, contrast, emphasis, balance, and proportion. I usually like to start beginning with movement, which by the way is not about animations, watch out, it's about how a work of art, even if static, can kind of move your eyes in some path or direction, guide your eyes. For the Sea Dragon, the way I see it, the work with the lines and the shapes are helping a lot with it, especially with this idea of a girth, like a thicker neck, then it gets to the head, which again, broadly you can say it's triangular-like-ish, and then it keeps getting thinner, and so it kind of makes like an arrow, you know, and so I see a little bit of that there. And also I guess very slightly on these protuberances at the back of the Sea Dragon, they have some pretty unique shapes and forms to them. And this time, especially for the shapes and forms, I see it helping convey movement, but then with the help of the elements of points and shapes and forms of this part of the dragon, and I guess also texture, I think also give to me a little bit of movement, you know, also convey a little bit of movement in the opposite direction this time. So it's from the neck to the nose and from the back of the head outwards. That's mostly how I see movement here. So the question is, does any of that, first things first, is any of that helping with the idea of an enemy for Epic Battle Fantasy V? Kinda, I believe. Because there's the classic, for example, there's the classic idea that on the game design of Epic Battle Fantasy, enemies are always on the right of the screen, right side of the screen, and so they attack to the left. They attack the player characters on the left side. They are on the right. I don't know if this is mirrored for you, but whatever. They are on the right side of the screen, attack the player character on the left side of the screen. So the Sea Dragon here, pointing to the left, I think ties well to its attack. Indeed, there's literally an attack where this dragon pokes at the player characters, and the principle of movement conveying the direction of its attacks, I think ties well to the game design of Epic Battle Fantasy. And in that sense, for an enemy, you know, it's not an NPC of Epic Battle Fantasy, and also this is if this was like Earthbound, for example, you know, a game with the game design similar to Earthbound, where the enemy is in front of you, this wouldn't work that way, you know. So you get it, hopefully. So yeah, that's it. What about the idea of a seahorse? The principle of movement helps a bit there, I would say, because the seahorses have like the head, the neck not so much, right? Because seahorses have those like S-shaped bodies, and they kind of go down, but they still have the head with similar shapes and forms. I see the principle of movement tied to that, and in this case I think the lines are also helping a bit. But perhaps more importantly, I think the textures and the forms of this back part of the Sea Dragon, I think they are, which are helping convey movement, as I said it, I think they are pretty close to the traits of a seahorse. The principle of movement is bringing our eyes to it, guiding our eyes by it, so naturally I think it's helping us to notice those traits and make it easier to notice, to get the joke of an overgrown seahorse, for example, and to understand it like that, you know. And finally, what about the idea of a sea dragon, a dragon from the sea? So, fair enough, just saying that it has some traits of a seahorse already brings us to the sea somewhat, right? So now the question is, does it help us convey that it is a dragon of sorts? Through the principle of movement, at least. In this case, I think yeah, because especially of the neck. When I was talking about the seahorse, I don't think the neck's helping, but in the case of the idea of a dragon, I think the neck is helping a lot. Dragons have been described, I believe, as winged serpents on a number of... what was it? Depictions? Where did I see that? Yeah, well, in literature, on some occasions, dragons were like described as winged serpents. They have, or lizards, or I think it was serpents. And especially like on Oriental lore from the East, they are a bit more like that. And this neck and the principle of movement tied to it, I think helps somewhat convey that kind of body of a serpent. You know, could be there more stuff behind it. I think like Western dragons from Western lore and literature and stories, let's say, are have more of a body of closer to a lizard, but Eastern dragons from countries of Asia and I'm not sure if other continents also, but I know of Chinese dragons, for example. They have been depicted with a more serpentine body on a number of occasions. So yeah, because of that iconography of the Oriental dragons, I believe the principle of movement is helping convey that. And naturally, the head is not too far off also, but yeah, the head is also not too far off. Both things I think complement each other nicely. If it was just the head, would it be enough? Maybe there's just the head even would be enough, because I'm not sure this kind of head of morphology is common in other animals, not that I think about it, so maybe I didn't need to talk about the neck. But whatever. Animals, this sort of morphology. I don't know. Maybe some lizards, whatever. But in any case, I do see the principle of movement here helping convey that morphology, as I said, and tying it to a dragon. And since we are at it, it's also helping convey that this is a seahorse. Naturally, if this is a dragon seahorse thing, it's not too far off to say that it is a sea dragon, you know. If anything, I think it's very interesting to tie the ideas of a seahorse and a dragon for a sea dragon, you know. Kind of makes sense, you know. What would a sea dragon look like? Maybe a seahorse, you know. I think that's a clever way to answer that question. What would a sea dragon look like? A dragon of the sea. Also, very interestingly, when it comes to the principle of movement, this back part here, protrusions thing, I think they kind of convey a bit of some sort of the shapes, the forms, more the shapes I guess, less so the forms of spikes. And again, it's not always I think, but on a number of dragon depictions, like through literature, stories, whatnot, you see a number of spikes alongside their scales. So I find this interesting. And again, this looks a bit like, I don't know, coral reefs, maybe. So another interesting way to try to communicate, and a creative way, in my opinion, to communicate the idea of a dragon from the sea. And yeah, that's it for the principle of movement, I believe. And also, if I were to talk about the idea of something tied to water, since it's communicating something of a sea dragon and a seahorse, naturally there's already that. Maybe there would be other stuff also, but whatever. What about the idea of the principle of unity/variety? Unity is all about how different parts of the artwork can look like they're working together. Many ways to accomplish it: proximity, proximity, repetition, continuity, for example, patterns. So stuff like the repetition of the yellow of the shades of yellow and the continuity of it. Continuity like on the head, for example, and the neck, but also they're kind of separated visually. They're not continuous, but they are repeating their shades. Similarly here for the red part, and the red part here is a pretty cool. Another cool way to achieve unity, which is through alignment. They are not connected. They are, although there is also there's still repetition of the colors here, but they are kind of aligned. The shape of the jaw with the lines here, of the underside part of the dragon's neck. You know, that's another way to achieve unity. What else for unity? If it's about repetition and patterns, we could talk and riffings. We could talk about the core riftings. Also, give me a second, please. The neighbor is talking to someone, and I don't know. Hope it's a bit quieter now. And all that stuff. Also, repetition on the points and the textures and forms and shapes on this back part of the dragon's head. The continuity and repetition of the lines, thickness and color. All of that. And for variety, we could mention, for example, the unique colors and the shapes for the leaf here. Also the unique colors and lines for the eye. The eye has the unique thicker line in it and the white in it. So those are examples of variety, which are, as I said, the opposite of unity. We consider those at the same time. At least that's how I do in this critique. Some authors consider them separate principles, but let's not get into that discussion. Not right here, right now, at least, right? Not the time and place for it. But so all of those are examples of unity. So cool stuff. Does any of that help convey this is an enemy for Battle Fantasy 5? Let's see, for unity / variety. Oftentimes I have mentioned the idea that there's like shadows in specific on the right side of the enemy and brighter parts on the left side. But here on the Sea Dragon, I don't see that pattern, which is, you know, you could tie it again to the idea of enemies on the right side of the screen for Battle Fantasy 5. But for this enemy, there seems to be light mostly on the upper part and less so on the left or right part of it. You know, and shadows here on this downside part. I suppose the protrusions here of this back part of the head of the Sea Dragon are kind of all of them pointing to the right. I suppose much like, yeah, the dragon is facing left basically, and but it could have a number of these protrusions protruding to the right, you know, and stuff like that. Although maybe this is tying a bit to the principle of unity, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because it's actually common for principles of art to influence each other, help each other. But yeah, I think a little bit of movement is helping here, but there is still, as I said, repetition in the in this case it will be riffings. A riffing is like a repetition, which is not perfect, let's say, slight differences. So there's like riffings here in these protrusions. They are slightly different, but although the colors are repeating themselves, the shapes and forms are slightly different, although it has a lot of, you know, you understand, of repetition there. But in general, they seem to be pointing to the light protruding from the left and going to the right, you know. And I think that's helping a bit to convey the direction this enemy is facing, with the help of the principle of movement here, admittedly. Also, what else? I think that's mostly it for unity / variety when it comes to conveying this an enemy for EBF5. Yeah, mostly basically this repetition here. The rest, again, there is movement here, but I'm not sure the unity or variety is helping with that. Yeah, to me at least it's just the protrusions here. Okay, well, that said, what about the idea of a seahorse? The seahorse, easily. I did mention that to me, like the shapes and forms and textures of this part of the head are pretty reminiscent of the ones of the seahorse, the morphology of one. The points I think are also helping a bit. So naturally being it's like repeated on like it's on here. This part being repeated, you know, continuous. There's a riff in there. Also to me help easily convey this is a seahorse. This has traits of a seahorse. What about the idea of a sea dragon, dragon from the sea? So again, it's no coincidence that I guess it helps us that I'm first thinking of if it's a seahorse or not, and then a sea dragon, because then I think it makes more sense. So I already got the sea part going on here. So is Unity helping convey this as a dragon somehow, somewhat? Or Unity/variety. Let's see here. So there is Unity on this underside part of the jaw and the neck, right? Which is pretty cool. But I'm not sure that's enough to convey this is a dragon. Just to have a jaw. Many creatures have jaws, you know. What else? Okay, this is interesting. There is the variety on the eye of the sea dragon with this very specific thicker vertical eye thing, which is not present in all animals. I think cats have this kind of eye, for example. Okay, so this limits the samples a bit, let's say. The sample space is how they say it. You know, of how many animals has traits like this. But this is enough to convey this is a dragon now. I suppose there is also variety on the snout in the forms and the space in there when it comes to those elements. I didn't mention like a tight use of space in between the eyes and what else. And these parts underside the neck and the jaw also. But I suppose the element of space, basically the shape of the hole, let's say, it's still unique in comparison to the other ones. Even if all of them are like tight spaces, they are tight spaces different than each other. So yeah, so the snout I think it also helps a bit. But is that all good enough to help convey this a dragon? Having a snout, having a jaw, having this monster eye, let's say, for lack of a better term. Is there anything else helping? Technically there's like unity repetition on the muscle, the textures of the neck of the sea dragon, but I don't see that being something necessarily tied to dragons. Since for dragons I think it's easier actually to look at their scales and to see something with a different texture to them. Okay, but you know what, I think of those things together that I mentioned, the jaw and the snout, especially the snout and the monster eye, let's say, I think they are good enough to help convey this is a dragon together. And because there is, you know, unity on the jaw and the underside part of the neck thing, and variety on the eye in color and lines, and variety on the snout in forms and space, in different ways through unity/variety, but all of them I think are together. I think they help convey a dragon. They're good enough for that, I would say. And we already mentioned the idea of a seahorse, this part here. I guess I could also say that the elemental value, the way the light reflects on the surface of the dragon, also kind of reminisces to me a little bit of scales. Not necessarily scales, sorry, but yeah, a bit of scales, even though I don't see scales for texture. but the element of value kinda, to me, it shines a bit like if it was a scale, you know, or some other surface of a marine animal. So I would say that also helps a bit convey a bit. Helps a bit convey it is a dragon from the sea. At least how I see it. Okay. And again, if we would talk about something tied to water, if this is a sea dragon and a seahorse, then it's helping that. What about the element of the principle of contrast? How about like differences in the artwork and how do they compare? We could talk about the contrast between red and yellow in colors, you know, the underside jaw part in red and the other upper side in yellow, and the details, the edges of the shapes and forms are in red, and the protrusions are in red, and the surface are in yellow. So all of those are interesting contrasts. I could also mention stuff like the green being contrast with the red and yellow around, and variety is an easy way to get into contrasts often. So there is also some contrast in the eyes and the stuff around. And the stuff around in the white. It's a bit of a weaker contrast, right? Because white and yellow both are very light colors. But there is still some contrast there, and the thickness of the line that makes the iris of the eye. So, any of that help convey this is an enemy from Epic Battle Fantasy V. Well, I did mention contrast between the protrusions. Also, I see some contrast. There's contrast in the protrusions between the red protrusions and the green leaf, and also contrast because of how thin they are with the more with the head of the dragon, which is a bit more concentrated in its forms and shapes. And then again, tying to movement, I see that helping convey the direction the dragon faces. So help tie to the game design of Epic Battle Fantasy V. What about the idea of a seahorse? I would say there is some contrast in especially the texture of these parts, which again I see very iconic, very noticeable, looks like the traits of a seahorse to me, and I see contrast with that and the more smoother, flatter parts of the snout, for example, of the nose. And so there is some contrast there, which I think help convey the traits of a seahorse. And finally, the ideas of a dragon. Well, I did mention some amount of contrast with the eye and the rest, and then also the jaw and the rest. There's contrast there. Just the snout. The snout also, I suppose, has some contrast because there is some use of space here and no use of space around it. So some contrasts are stronger than others, but I will say that it's also helping with the conveying the idea of a dragon, and thus a dragon from the sea, because it also helps convey the seahorse. What about emphasis? Let's talk about the principle of emphasis. Principle of emphasis is all about like the idea of the work of art having some sort of focal point that keeps your eyes there. Movement guides your eyes. Emphasis keeps your eyes somewhere. Let me drink some water also. Water, oh my god. Anyway. So emphasis. For emphasis, let me see here. I'm kind of torn between. I think to me it's the eye basically. I was thinking maybe with the textures, forms, shapes on this part here and points could be a source of emphasis, but there's so much, it's so spread around, it's hard to say I don't know. It's hard to say there's emphasis on the whole part, on the whole area kind of thing. Because there's no emphasis in spread out, right? There's a lot of it, so to me, even though there's a lot of it and a lot going on here, to me I say the eye is the greatest source of emphasis here. In its unique use of space, again color and lines, the thicker lines there, and a bit of the placement there, again variety, so there's not much proximity to anything else, there's no other eyes there. So yeah. Does any of that help? So emphasis on the eye help convey this is an enemy from Epic Battle Fantasy 5. Actually I think yeah. I was thinking it wouldn't, but I do think there is like the stuff I said for shadow. There's shadow on the right part of the eye and brightness on the left side, which is intrinsically tied to the idea of the action, everything going on in the middle of the screen, the enemies being on the right side of the screen, the game design of Battle Fantasy 5. Specifically on the eye, the use of value helps convey that, so very interesting way how that turned out. Also, end of stream time, let's go. Let's try to go quicker here. Okay, emphasis help with that. What about the idea of a seahorse? Now I think it hardly. Being a menacing looking eye monster eye, I don't think helps at all with the conveying this is a seahorse. So yeah, if you, I usually, what you can do, if you think about the principle of emphasis, some authors also consider hierarchy the same thing, and if you believe in multiple focal points of emphasis, if you call it hierarchy, so there's like a bigger point of emphasis and then a smaller one, If we do it like that, as I usually do, I guess I would consider this part here with some amount of emphasis, especially in comparison to the rest. Although again, like it's kind of weird because I'm not sure how much emphasis you can say. It's kind of spread out. But yeah, maybe you can okay, I have to make a choice here. Okay, I guess I would say like around this bottom part, I guess I can see some amount of emphasis here. It's very slightly protruding a little bit more, I guess I would say something like that. So yeah, I guess I would say like this part has some amount of emphasis to it, or hierarchy in this case. And thus that is also helping convey this is a seahorse I suppose. But the eye is not. Just this part because I consider emphasis and hierarchy the same principle. So but other than these 2 points I don't think that's hardly there's any to me. And what about the idea of a dragon? Here just for emphasis on the eye, and on this part I don't think it's enough, because now I think the eye could okay, this is something from the sea, so if there is some hierarchy on this part, but just the eye I think could tie to a serpent or a snake, which even though again the dragons in Eastern lore often were winged serpents, but still just the serpent, a serpent is not the same thing that a dragon always, you know. Just having this kind of eyes, but this is kind of a monster eye, you know. It's not just about serpents and dragons. You can see it on other creatures and monsters, on lore and culture, whatever. But anyway, so emphasis there, and on this part I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough to convey it's a dragon. So gonna be missing there. And yeah. So now let's move on to the principle of balance, which is all about if there is visually some sort of state of equilibrium or tension in the artwork. So let's see here. Equilibrium there in general, so not much to talk about there, but I do see points of tension. I do see like tension in the neck of the dragon, how it's kind of lifting especially behind on this part here. I kind of see some tension with lifting the head, and also slightly very slightly like on the way but I'm taking into account animation. I was going to say the way the protrusions move, but I'm not sure I should do that, consider the animation here. If it was like a picture static, maybe there's some like tension. It looks like something that can easily I don't know. that can easily fall off, but this wouldn't that be balance, visual balance then? Equilibrium? And the animations kinda fooled me there, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know. Yeah, I guess... I don't know. Maybe it's more a slight lack of equilibrium. It's because they are like protruding. And they don't look like super stable structures or anything. I'm not sure. Not sure, man. Not sure. Yeah, sure. I'll say this. That I see it slightly so like the way the base of it's so thin that and it's a bit thicker on the end of it. I think that conveys a little bit of lack of equilibrium there on these red protrusions, and even on the leaf, I suppose, something like that. And I see tension on the back of the neck, as I said, on the tip of the neck just before the head, like it's lifting the head. That's what I see here. So with all that said, does any of that help convey? This is an enemy for Epic Battle Fantasy 5. Okay, if we're focusing on the protrusions and they are kind of directed to the right, again, with the help of the principle of movement here, I think that's communicating the direction the enemy is facing, so again, that part of the game design of Epic Battle Fantasy. What about... so much hanging on that little detail. What about the idea of a seahorse? So these protrusions here, again, I see them more closely related to something that you would see on a coral reef, maybe. But I don't think the protrusions are stuff from a seahorse exactly, much less the leaf. At least I don't believe I have ever seen a seahorse with this kind of structure on their body attached to it. So I'm gonna say that and the neck's not helping either, because again the seahorse doesn't even have this morphology for the neck in the first place. As I said, they're kind of like S-shaped, right, in their bodies. They don't have to hang their heads. So I don't see the principle of balance here visually helping convey this is a seahorse. What about the idea of a dragon? So the lifting neck is the lifting neck helping, because dragons often are depicted with a long neck. Again, a number of them are winged serpents, right? So maybe. The way it's lifting the neck. We would kind of have to look into if there is anything else with this kind of morphology again. And I think this probably helps with the idea. Snakes kind of slither on the ground instead of lifting their heads. Lizards don't lift their heads, they are pretty close to the ground also as they move around, right? At least all the lizards I have ever known. The idea of an animal that lifts their head with a neck, there probably are animals like that, right? But I don't see it for snakes or lizards, which would be the closest equivalent, but I think I do see it kind of for dragons, again, because they're often depicted with long necks. So I don't think I have ever seen a dragon with a short neck, with a no neck. Maybe some dragons have short necks, but like a head inside the torso, let's say. Never seen a dragon like that at all. They always have a neck, as short as it is, they always have a neck. So yeah, I think that's helping convey the idea of a dragon. And interestingly, I think also the protrusions here, because again, I do believe they are kinda in their forms, especially their forms and color. I think they resemble to me a bit the idea of a coral reef. So yeah, And also this leaf here I think resembles me to me a bit as a seaweed. So in a very interesting way, I think it's a cool way to help convey that this is a dragon from the sea, without relying on the fact that this looks like a seahorse, you know, just by itself a cool way to convey that. I think was achieved here through the principle of balance, very cool. A dragon from the sea. And finally, the last principle of art, the principle of proportion, about the different sizes of things, and if there's anything with some unique dimensions to it, that kind of stuff. So, proportions here. I usually like to place things in scales to make things easier for me. In this case, I think I would roughly place like the neck and the head of the dragon in the highest scale of things. Not sure if I would separate them, because there might be more stuff behind the neck, but just what we're looking at here. And smaller than the head and the neck, I would say the jaw. I'm separating the maxilla from the jaw. For a work of art, you kind of should do that, you know, like separate parts usually. What else? And smaller than that, I guess the protrusions and the red protrusions and the seaweed. And smaller than that, the eye, the snout. And I guess also that would be it, like 4 scales. And I guess like this, the tail part, the textures, the forms on this side part, I would place roughly in the same, which is a part of the head, but I would also place roughly in the same scale as the protrusions, I believe. I think that is it. And about anything with some very notable dimension here, I don't think anything too notable, that's worth mentioning by itself. So okay, with all that said, does any of that help convey the idea that this is a enemy for Epic Battle Fantasy V, from Epic Battle Fantasy V? For proportions, the head, the neck, the jaw, the protrusions, the leaf, and the texture parting the details, the eye and the snout. Actually, I think kinda. I think on the scale of the protrusions, the leaf, and the details, all of those together are kind of pointing to the right, you know, much like we said, that logic. So there's that logic again. But the thing is, since all of them have like the similar sizes, everything on the same scale having something in common, I think helps convey the vision. And so in this case, I do believe they are, all of these things with roughly similar sizes, I do believe they're helping convey that the animal is pointing to the left, and so all of that stuff again, Epic Battle Fantasy design. Cool. So, and what about the idea of a seahorse? For proportions, I don't think anything helps, because this time so these details, textures, and forms of traits of a seahorse on the side of the head, they are on the same scale as the protrusions and the leaf, and so all of that's kind of mixed together, and I don't see. I already said it, but I don't see the leaf and the protrusions as being parts, things that convey the morphology or traits of a seahorse. So, and the rest I don't think is neither here nor there. So I don't see the proportion helping convey this as a seahorse. And what about the idea of a sea dragon, a dragon from the sea? So let's see. There is the maxilla, the head, and the neck. There's the jaw, there is the seahorse traits, the protrusions and the leaf, and the eye and the snout. Yeah, I think it is. Because I think for me the eye and the snout having its unique scales and the jaw, so this time is even more than one scale. Since there is like 2 scales, not only one. for me, just having one would be enough, but having 2 scales of them conveying traits of a dragon together specifically. In this case, I think it's strong enough. And also, maybe the head and the neck also... I think they're also helping, but again, not sure if by itself they would be enough. But I think having a scale of their own and for their dimensions, I think they're also helping convey that these are dimensions of a dragon. So yeah, just but that's all about a dragon. What about a sea dragon? We chose to be very specific, right? And then there's the other scale, which I think helps, because again, it's like there is these protrusions with coral reef appearance to me in their forms and color. There is the leaf, which reminds me of seaweed, especially the color, because I think seaweed has a darker shade of green, like this leaf here. And again, there's like the textures, the points, and the shapes and forms of this part, which resembles me of a seahorse. So again, through different ways, I think it's being conveyed that this is a dragon from the sea, and without the principle conveying this is a seahorse to me. Very cool. And yeah, that was the last principle. So I can finally pass judgment. I think every idea of the vision was conveyed through, I think, all or most of the principles, right? And even if you had added simply the idea of this is a creature tied to water, since it was conveyed that this is a sea dragon and a seahorse, that falls neatly in line, because they obviously are creatures from the sea tied to water. So anyway, my only conclusion here is that this is a successful work of art. Congratulations to the designer! I think they found some very cool ways to use the elements, the way they handled it. I think it was pretty cool in their way to communicate this as a sea dragon. Especially this sea dragon part. I think there were some very creative solutions there, design-wise. So that's it for today. Join me next week for more gameplay and art critique. See ya then! Bye! See ya!